The Griswalds are back on their second holiday road in 1985's National Lampoon's European Vacation, the film that knocked Back to the Future off the top of the box office.
Great Scott!
After winning an all-expense-paid European trip on a game show, the Griswolds take a leap across the pond to England, France, Germany, and Italy, where they find misadventures involving leaked sex tapes, a lederhosen mob, Italian villainy, language barriers,
Daddy's speaking English.
and of course, the French. But does European Vacation live up to its classic predecessor? And is it required viewing? I'll give you this much. Back to the Future apparently did come back for another 8 weeks at number 1. So European Vacation had its moment of glory, and then it went down faster than that plane at the end. Oh man.
And then it went down in a blaze of glory.
But anyway, so European Vacation, or as I like to call it, Stupid Americans in Pretentious Land.
Could it just as well be Pretentious Americans and Stupid Land as well? Anything's possible.
One or the other. See, this is the brilliance of this alternative title. European Vacation, for as much flack as it gets, it still has some very memorable sequences. I think that if there's one that most people picture when they think of European Vacation is Clark Griswold getting stuck in the roundabout. There's the Big Ben, kids, for an entire day, which is comedy gold. That scene alone would get it. If you were just to watch that scene, I say that scene is required. Does that make the film required? That's another question.
Yes, that scene is required. Absolutely. There are movies out there that are complete trash, save for one scene. That's accurate, and I'm not here to say that I'm not revealing my vote, nor would I even come close to using the words complete trash to evaluate European Vacation. But I'll put it this way: there are movies that have become more famous on single scenes that aren't as iconic. I think what they're trying to say is the worst driving traffic hazard in existence is in fact the roundabout.
Big roundabouts like that. Yes, and apparently a lot of people sent him letters. Chevy Chase letters saying that happened to them too, although I hope to God it wasn't all day. Small roundabouts, we have a lot of them here in Rochester. And I'll say, they're much more effective for traffic, but the big ones that have like 5-6 lanes, forget about it. Those are nightmares. I've had to drive through a few of them. It's insane.
Listen, man, if you're pro roundabout at all, I think you're nuts, but that's a whole other question.
You just need to experience the roundabout. Of course, I can understand why you have a problem. You live near the world's most dangerous roundabout in Clearwater, Florida. I understand your reservations, don't get me wrong. There is a little bit more of a likability to Clark in this one than over the first one, although I would say that the first one is a much stronger film and much better in its construction. Even in the few times where it delved into family drama, it made the smart decision and it didn't let the drama become comedic. It let the drama stand on its own, which is something that you don't see many comedies do. But the risk of that was it made Clark a less likable character. So when he does have his big blow up at the end and he takes over Wally World with a gun, you're a little less sympathetic. I think I like Ellen a little bit more. She has more to do in this film rather than just be the voice of reason.
Correct. And by the way, I appreciate the fact that it is in European Vacation that we find out his middle name is Wilhelm. That's great.
Although they spelled Griswold wrong. They spelled it with an A. In all the other films, it's spelled with an O. This is my one disappointment in Christmas Vacation, because I felt like they should have spelled it with a different letter. They should have gone for E, and all the vacation films would have Griswold spelled with a different vowel. You could have gotten at least 6 of them if you included Y.
Well, true. I feel like rather than put E like you said, they might get away with adding the U.
Griswold. I mean, he's supposed to be German. So in the same way where we evaluated National Lampoon's Vacation, because being that it's an episodic film, and this one, dare say, even more so.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because you call it episodic. To me, I think it's a hour 50-minute sketch comedy. An
hour 30-minute sketch comedy. At least in Vacation, it had the carrot. They were getting to Wally World. They had the punchline set up throughout the whole film. With this film, there is no narrative thrust to it. You're just really with them on vacation as they're getting from antic to antic to antic. And I'll get to, they try to attach a climax. Now, how successful it is, we'll let you know when we get to Italy. But before we even embark on our fantasy film, European Vacation, let's start by talking about our favorite professor from BRISCO County Jr. in the Pig in the Poke sequence. What's more surprising, that they actually won or that they got that far through their own merit to begin with?
The fact that they were already the champions is problem number one. Two is that they were around long enough to amass that many prizes. Like, they were Ken Jennings before Ken Jennings was a thing on Jeopardy, okay? Seriously, though, I love the gimmick of how they won the game so much that I'm going to hide the spoiler alert. It was perfect in my mind for what a vacation movie should be.
Maybe Clark Griswold is the Forrest Gump of game shows. This opening and going into the plane sequence as well includes two bits of humor, which could be a little bit dated. Number one, John Astin satirizing Richard Dawson and making out with the teenage girl. And then Princess Diana's portrayal being so far removed from the comedic twist of what they were satirizing at the time. Do those sequences still work for you?
They work for me because I know the source material. The real question is whether or not you know Gomez Addams. To see that kind of bright, cheery personality, typically wholesome, and then when he gets to Audrey, what the hell? That still works. The whole situation with Di and Charles and the Queen works less so because Di, I still don't understand why, you'll pardon the rhyme, was a damn celebrity in the 80s like you cannot imagine, of international renown. Like, before Kardashian was a Kardashian, let's be clear.
She was the people's princess.
Oh, it was crazy.
I think that in general, and these two scenes are kind of indicative of a problem I have. No, it's a problem. It's just not a word. But one of the things I think is weaker about this film is they have a lot of decent ideas, but the follow through isn't as strong as they could be. Them satirizing Richard Dawson with a long kiss is literally the easiest joke they can do. They got some great lookalikes for Chuck and Di. I have to say. But
with Charles Doubles, he was too damn handsome.
I think that most of the dream sequences, with one exception, are a little pedantic. I don't think they were particularly funny, although I have to say Rusty's dream outfit is like the most 80s thing I've ever seen. The Sound of Music spoof, brilliant, which is shot on location, is absolutely awesome. And this is something I remember, not that I'm a big fan of this film, but I remember when there was an interview with some of the kids who appeared in Eurotrip, and I think this was Jay Leno, they were asked how they enjoyed traveling around the world to film this movie. They're like, we filmed this here in LA, One thing I do appreciate about European Vacation is, and they might as well rename it European Location, because that's one of the highlights of this film. I do enjoy a lot of aspects of England. I think there's a strong start. Any movie that depicts sexual predator Hagrid is a winner.
Well, so much for that monetization. And if like, what's the French word? Soufflé.
Soufflé means soufflé.
The England sketch, more than anything else, is probably the most relatable, because it has to start smaller as it builds up later in the film. But I think it's the most relatable. People having trouble driving there, people having trouble communicating, even though it's in English.
Overall, I feel like England was one of the, if not the strongest destination in the mix.
I think there is a disjointed nature. They get in the hotel and they discover there's no bag boy, so they have to force the old lady. That didn't make sense. There's a guy outside in pain. And then later, as soon as they leave their hotel and they're getting in one accident after another, they keep saying they're trying to get to their hotel, which doesn't make any sense.
Here it is, kids. Our English transportation. Now we're going to have some fun, huh?
1 minute later.
I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to get us back to our hotel.
An American!
Now let's talk about France. Part of me wants to say they deserve everything they got from that arrogant waiter because they were ordering hamburgers in Paris.
Agreed.
But on the other hand, I think that that France in general gets it the worst out of all of them as far as in the satirization.
I'm sorry, dude. The waiter is spot on. The guys who I thought were a little bit, what's his word, aggressive were the hotel concierges that were, talking about typical American a-holes based on the passport photos. That was a bit much. And frankly, that particular sequence didn't land for me. But the waiter is so perfect. Maybe my problem is one of the times I went to Paris, I literally was with somebody, his first meal, I should say, because I didn't do that. His first meal in Paris was chicken wings. Listen, man, bring the guy dishwater all he deserves, okay?
Or American champagnes, which is a great line for the Coca-Cola.
He's not wrong, damn it.
When I first saw this as a kid, and it showed the 4 countries, and the Pig in the Poke sequence, the 4 countries are going to visit, being Greek, I was disappointed that Greece wasn't included. And then when they get to the French section, I saw they had treated the French, I'm like, perhaps it's not a bad thing that Greece wasn't included. It's probably indicative of the thing that the first 2 vacation films did, essentially, is they basically sent up the stereotype of every single place they went. And there's nothing much more American than, we got 15 minutes, we can check out the Louvre.
Oh, bro, I was with somebody that did that ish.
For me, the highlight of the film is Germany. I think almost every sequence here works on one level or another. Even a throwaway joke. It's probably my favorite joke in the film.
Sex, Daddy.
That'll do, Audrey.
Dad, that's German for 6.
Guten Tag. My family and I are looking for sex.
Violent.
I like the premise of ending up at the wrong family's house.
Yes.
And actually spending the whole night there and leaving the next day. I think the punchline could have been a little bit stronger.
They're having all these interactions and they're just chatting and blah, blah, blah. And poor Audrey's all like, it's just nice to have somebody to listen as she fawns over Johnny from...
Johnny Lawrence, yeah.
Johnny Lawrence from Karate Kid, who we would come to find out was so crushed by what happened with Audrey that he ended up opening a dojo.
I like to think that that's Johnny Lawrence and he just goes by Jack because his name was thrown through the mud in the Karate Kid.
But the fact that that setup is there, the punch isn't strong necessarily. Then it's like, how the hell should I know? I think if it's too strong, those poor, nice old people are a little too bitter. Like, we have to really realize that they were just that kind of where they just rolled with it. Whenever Rusty's trolling for chicks, it's just a waste of my time. I'm not here to say it doesn't age well or it's not a little too obvious, but keep in mind this is made in the 80s, and if you can find an opportunity to slide boobies into the show, it's going to increase the popularity and the mystique simply because you didn't have
I was surprised that this was rated PG-13. If it came out today, it definitely would have been an R, I think.
Quite possible.
Oh, they did cut out one F word.
It looked like it was right out of TV. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so obvious. It bothers every time I watch a film. That it takes me out. That little 3 seconds takes me out. Like, what's the point? The first one was rated R, was a huge hit.
Try watching Major League on network TV.
God. At least in the German section, you get a little bit of a deviation. I think it's a breath of fresh air. If the German sequence was just the same iteration of the jokes in the first 2, this film will be a total wash, in my opinion. But it's a nice breath of fresh air and good countryside as well.
Oh yeah, well, and I think you're missing the stereotype touched on with the pugnacity of the Germans, where they turn a dance number into a damn fight and lynching.
But that's a sequence that's strong regardless of the ethnicity. Where I think that the jokes in the first 2 sections work just because of our knowledge of the stereotypes with those ethnicities.
So what you're trying to say is the stereotypes are more subtly spun into the Germans.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. I think it's a better thought out sequence. Now, the moment they get on the train to escape, as far as I'm concerned, from that point on, the film goes downhill for me, because Italy, I think that the sequences in Italy are just there to add an artificial climax to the episodic narrative spun in this film. I mean, a National Lampoon's film, vacation film specifically, does not need a villain. Clark is his own worst enemy. The film does not need a villain thrown in at the last second with a plot that doesn't make any sense. And then we get Clark Griswold, action hero. If he's that good of a driver, how did he have so many problems in the first 2 films?
Well, in fairness, during the first film, he managed to find a parking space and do a great power slide, basically asleep.
Well, up and at 'em. We're here.
That Italy comes as late in the movie as it does, and they're trying to shoehorn a plot as they do. I'm with you. It just does not land for me.
And I think this is one of the reasons that European Vacation is, out of the first 3 films at the very least, the weakest.
Yeah, that's Wally World. I mean,
well, that's what makes the first film a success, is because there's a carrot, where you're headed, the destination of the journey. In European Vacation, it's just their antics while they're on vacation, and oh crap, how do we wrap this up? We'll add a villain at the last second that tries to kidnap. It's very, very artificial. And I think that one of the strengths of the early Vacation films in particular, something that the remake, reboot, whatever the hell you want to call it, missed, is that a lot of the jokes, the more effective jokes, come from a relatable sphere. You can see, although exaggerated for comedic purposes, a lot of the best humor comes from things that that can happen. Somebody, once again, going into England and running across somebody that speaks English you think you would understand, but you don't understand a word of it. Running into a huge phone bill from a hotel, which I have to admit, I made that mistake when my parents were driving across country. I called a girl, not realizing they charged like $3 a minute. Those are very relatable jokes. And then when it gets to this, I don't even understand the plot of this villain. They hide somebody in the trunk, so they can drive away, so they can go back and get them. But somehow the police are aware that they're at the hotel, but then it had the police showing up at the hotel had nothing to do with them. It doesn't make any sense. The whole plot, the villain's plot, doesn't even make any sense. So it ends on a very artificial note, although I will give some credit. Seeing Chevy Chase in that chase sequence, there are some amusing aspects of it. I love they make jokes about going to see all the fountains and then they end up in another fountain. But it's not, once again, the fountain thing is not strong enough to be a running gag to end in a climax. Did you notice there was a running gag of visiting all the fountains?
I did not.
Exactly. So, Kyle, would you consider National Lampoon's European Vacation to be required viewing?
It's interesting with this particular installment. It's something that I have fun with when I watch it, but every time that I do, I remember, like, I keep saying to myself every time that I do, yeah, it's not quite as good as I remember it. Probably being uplifted by having that vacation name in it. Hell, if you ask me even, and nobody asked yet, but I could probably make a strong argument, and I might change my mind when and if we actually do Vegas Vacation, that Vegas Vacation is a better movie. The only reason why I won't come out right now and say it immediately is very simple. It's just been that long since I've seen Vegas Vacation. But one thing we're finding out, Randy Quaid not in this movie, and yet it's the one that's the weakest. Coincidence? I think not. At the end of the day, it's clear that the European Vacation is the weakest installment. I'm going to call it recommended. And I'll put it this way. I think based on our conversation regarding the original Vacation movie not being something that aged quite as well, this movie is guilty of that as well to a lesser extent. But I can make an argument that they both belong in a museum. So I'm definitely going to go with recommended for European Vacation. And easily the weakest installment. I'll tell you, if they missed too many more jokes in France, could have very well been lowered to a pass.
It's interesting you should mention, like, every time I watch this film, I think I'm gonna like it more than I do. But at the end of the day, this is an episodic adventure that struggles for a narrative. There's some very fun individual sequences, but they slog in succession. For every joke that works, there are 2 that don't, and it never feels like they're actually getting anywhere, in spite of all the transportation issues they have. I'm easily between it works and recommended. And the reason why I lean into recommended is because, like I said, some of those individual sequences have become legitimate comedic classics. I would probably call it a guilty pleasure. There's a lot that I do like about it. I recognize it's not a great film, and for as many jokes as it has, it falls on its face a lot of the times, but I call it a guilty pleasure. It's a fun movie. It works. It's not high art. It's not a kind of film that we really should be featuring on something called required viewing, since we're in the hunt for films that are required. But I think it gets a lot more crap than it deserves, to be honest. If somebody created a best of and took the half hour of this movie that worked well and put that out there, I would say that's required. And this movie is so loose in its narrative that you can probably do that without losing anything that's vital.
I could make an argument that these two are also the weakest incarnations of Audrey and Rusty.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put up much of a defense for that. This Rusty feels a little bit more of a continuation from the previous Rusty than any of the later incarnations, but it's the same joke.
I have trouble figuring out which one is older in which movie with these two, you know?
He's older in all of them except the Christmas.
But you're not sure about that in this one. And I think, I mean, I'm definitely under that impression, but then somehow, somewhere in there, Rusty got younger, and I don't...
You can't apply logic to the vacation films the same way you can't explain that James Bond is ageless.
It's not a GW CU, a Griswold Cinematic Universe.
The Griswold Cinematic Universe, where if we expand it to Karate Kid, I want to believe that this is Johnny Lawrence, except he just goes by Jack, and a lot of Johns go by Jack.
Well, then by that, you keep mentioning Jack. See, Beverly D'Angelo could arguably have a great-great-grandmother who was associated with Lightning Jack, and that Jack could be related to Lightning Jack. If you look at the blonde hair, it gets really awkward.
I can see Zabka being a long-lost descendant of Paul Hogan.
And let's be honest, the only way it could get more awkward is that probably no one's ever even heard of Lightning Jack, but I digress.
It's very difficult to find, oddly enough. You'd think that out of all the Paul Hogan films, outside of Crocodile Dundee and arguably Flipper, the Lightning Jack would be the easiest one to find.
I think it's a lot of fun, too.
Cuba Gooding Jr., all the inspirational speeches he gives in that film.